I have this lovely cutting from a Bougainvillea that I spotted as I was taking the dog for a walk this morning. So I bought a small piece that was hanging down, snipped it off, and I brought it home to see if I can get a little painting from this. It's got beautiful colours in there. There's pink, but lovely tones in here too of orange, little white centres, and the green leaves. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do the painting just with the flower or whether I might try and put a little bird in with it as well. I'm going to think about my composition, maybe make it up a little bit as I go along and see what happens with the painting of the flowers and what room I've left. Does it need a bird? Does it not need a bird? So I'm just going to see how I go making a painting from this little cutting. I remember painting Bougainvillea a long time ago. And I've just been through my little file cabinet and found the painting. This actually combined collage to create the Bougainvillea. I bought back some handmade paper from a trip to France. These leaves down the bottom here are actually collaged. The leaves were in the paper, and I tore off pieces and stuck them on here, and some little fibre type paper stuck up in here, then sort of painted the Bougainvillea around it. This was another paper, these dark green sections here. They were different handmade paper, and I've torn pieces off there to mimic green leaves. So that was quite a fun exercise. But today I'm not going to use collage, I'm just going to use paint. I've chosen today to paint on high white paper. Not that the Bougainvillea really needs some bright white, but sometimes with florals it does give a nice fresh take to the colour. This is hot press paper, something I've been painting on a little bit. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. When I mix up the papers, I tend to at least go with a bit of experimentation instead of feeling comfy with what I'm doing. So hot press, high white, Saunders Waterford, and this piece is 425 GSM. I probably will still take this down. It makes it a little bit easier and it won't move around perhaps quite so much on the camera as I'm painting. Like most painters, we have far too many brushes. We just accumulate them. They think something's going to be the next best thing to paint with. And out of all of the brushes I have here, during one painting, I probably pick about 4. And they tend to always seem to be the same 4. But it's nice to have different shapes. You've got rounds in different sizes. You've got mops. And it's a case of picking a brush on the day that seems to be ideal for making the shapes that you want the quickest way, you know, with fewer brush strokes. So I'll be choosing from my selection of brushes here. I tend to paint a lot these days with these mops. So I'll probably have a couple of those and maybe a small round if I've got to do anything really detailed. I'm going to be using some masking fluid to do some of the little white centres, and I'm thinking when I look at the texture of the flower that it's quite a crinkly look to the petals, and I'm thinking that maybe I might even try a little bit of cling film. I'm not sure. Sometimes I start painting and forget to get the cling film. But that's what I'm thinking that could work really well for this one today. I'll apply the masking fluid with this shaper, this coloured shaper I think it is, with this pointy thing on the end. Some type of crafting tool, because the masking fluid comes off it easily. And that way I won't ruin a brush. So I'm getting everything ready before I go, and I'm going to choose the colours next, because if you choose the colours, then you're not going to stop your creative process while you think, oh, what will I get next? So I think a little bit about my colours, and sometimes I might still change my mind as I'm going if something's not reacting quite the way I thought, but I have a plan to start off with. So I'm definitely going to obviously need the pinks, but as I say, a couple of these have got a really pretty sort of salmony orange colour really. So I'm going to either have to put some yellows in with this or try and find a paler orange here. I do see a lot of opera pink in here. It sometimes is a tricky paint to use because it is what they call fugitive. It hasn't got a good light fast rating. But I think if you put other things in with it, it's going to really help. So this is opera. So that's opera pink, opera rose. My paints in this palette here are a combination of Holbein, Winsor & Newton, maybe a couple of Daniel Smith. And then I have another palette that I've been experimenting with recently that is Core watercolours. They don't have an opera, but they do have quite a nice vibrant pink colour here that they call, what do they call this one? Well, it's Quinacridone red actually. So there's this pink colour. So I could have some of that. And sometimes even if you get the same pigment number, they have a different name, but the same pigment number from different manufacturers, they do react differently. But some of that combined with some of the pink, the opera pink, might do quite a nice choice for the pink parts. The salmony part, well, I have a transparent orange from Schminky, but it really is too orange. But I'm thinking maybe if I put a little bit of the opera in with it as well, I'm going to get more of that salmon colour. So I'm thinking that that probably will work quite well. So there we are. So far, 3 colours. So I've got the opera, either the Quin red from Core or the permanent rose that I have in here. If I use the permanent rose from in here, I might not have to use the other palette. Let's have a look. So there's the 2 combined. I like this one because it's sort of making a bit of texture up here. By using the hot press paper for my painting today, I haven't got the advantage of the paper giving me texture, because when you use something like the cold press or even the rough, you've got all the highs and lows and bumps of the paper, and it does help create a bit of texture. But the smooth, it won't. So I've got to rely on the pigment, and possibly that's where the cling film is going to come in. So I've thought about the colours for the flowers. The little white centres, I'm going to leave the white of the paper, and they've got just a tiny little dark green dot in them. There's tiny little green leaves in here, and the stems for the flowers are green and touches of pink. So when I work out what my greens are going to be next, all I have to do is use a little bit of the pink in with the green to get the stems and even the branch. So the leaves, they have a light veining. They're light on the back, dark on the front. And you know, you don't have to be really true to painting florals unless you're being botanical. But you know, it's nice to sort of get something that looks like it does belong with the rest of it. So for the greens, what am I going to use? Let's have a look here. I've got green gold, which is very handy because With green gold, it's a light green colour, but it can be changed so easily by adding in another colour to it. Here's some French ultramarine. Don't know if I'm going to want this, but let's have a look and see what it does. Yeah, so putting the ultramarine blue in there, you can see this. The ultramarine blue, I'm going to get a light green, a dark green, and some parts where it can be even more blue. I like that look. So there we are. I've got my two pinks, I've got my orange, and I've got ultramarine blue and green gold, and I might squeeze a little bit more of that green gold out. My pinks, don't know whether to go with this one. No, I'm going to go with the one from over here. So the core Quin red and the opera from here. And my transparent orange. So there's my colours worked out for the painting. So we'll see how I go down with the composition. Going to cover my paints here whilst I use the masking fluid, because I've had accidents in the past and I don't want to get anything splashed or spilt onto my paints. So a little cover on top of the paints here. So the masking fluid I'm using here, I don't know too much about this one, but somebody recommended it on the internet. Incredible White Mask, Liquid Frisket. I've tried so many different masking fluids and I don't have a lot of luck with most of them. I find them messy. I think I put a good job, done a good job as I'm putting them down, but chances are when I take it off, I haven't got anything very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to try and paint every little flower that's on this stem, but if I put a few little white parts in, I can build around those to be the centre. So I would put a few pieces of masking fluid. I don't know if you can even see where I've done that one. Let's have a look. Perhaps I'll lay that flat for a minute. So just finding, if I hold the stem in my hand, I can just sort of see almost like little miniature daisies in the middle of some of these. So I'm just going to do a white blob. Even got a little bug running across that's come off of the plant. So just a few little bits of white masking, and you don't have to think about doing them all. If you have too many, then you can paint some out if you don't need them, but if you don't put them in the first place, it's a pain to try and get back the white that you might want. So I'll just do a few of these to give me some white spaces as I work along. Trying to think of a composition for this, and I haven't really. I'm going to just play with the colour and see where it takes me. And sometimes you get a painting from it, sometimes you don't. But the experimentation and the play with the colour and the paint, well, that's really what it's all about. Whoops. Blob there. Now that you have to wait for the masking fluid to dry, which is okay. Sometimes I might put the masking fluid down and then start thinking about my colours, because I wait for this to dry and it's giving me something else to do. So I'm just going to let that dry for a minute. Whilst my masking fluid was drying, I did a little experiment with the cling film and just put some small pieces on the colour swatching that I had tried. And when I take that off, I definitely have got some nice texture in here for the petals. I hope it's going to do that on the hot press paper, but we shall just see. And also I was thinking that maybe I might use some salt. I've got a lot of spare paper up here, so this half sheet, I mean, could be cut down when I'm finished into a smaller painting, but I'm thinking maybe of more colour at the top on this side as well. Some Bougainvillea perhaps that is behind this stem in the front, and so it only really needs to be suggestion of the colour. So I'm thinking maybe of trying some salt in there. So I've got my salt ready. I may put it in as I paint, I may not. I'm just going to have to see how I go. So I'm just about ready to go. I think these are just about dry, but I want to be absolutely sure before I start painting. You touch them, and of course they do feel sticky, but as long as it doesn't come off on your fingers, you're okay to go. So I hope you enjoy watching me paint this. I hope I get a painting from it, but if I don't, I've enjoyed my walk this morning with the dog, finding this bit of inspiration, choosing some colours and having some fun to see what I can do. I've been waiting for the cling film to dry, and it's not quite dry, but I'm going to take it off because I can see that it has made marks underneath. It's probably not going to do any more, even if I leave it on here longer. Then I might just dry the paper a little bit just to get it to go back to being flat. I probably won't rub the salt off yet because that's still a bit wet up there, so I'll carefully add some heat up there to get that to dry. Then I could brush the salt off, and then I'm going to work with the texture and marks that are on here to bring the painting to a composition. So we'll see how we go. Carefully adding some heat to here. I don't want to melt the masking fluid onto the paper, or really make the glue, salt stick. So just a little bit of heat here to speed the process up a little bit so I can carry on filming. I'm going to try and zoom in here so you can see some of the texture that's been created here. Let's see how we go here. So up here, where the salt, I've rubbed the salt off, but you can see that it's left lots of little tiny interesting marks that are going to depict more of the blossom from the Bougainvillea in the background. And then where the cling film was, let's have a look here, so I'll come over this way a little bit, where the cling film is, or has been, there's interesting marks left by the plastic film on here. Sometimes you get a lot, sometimes you don't get very much, but it gives you a starting point to try and create something a bit interesting. I've added, I think, enough detail on the Bougainvillea. I'm going to take off the masking fluid when it's really dry there and just do something with the centres. But I'm looking at this big space down here. I could just do some splashes and call it a loose floral, or I could just try one more thing, and that's to put a bird in here, which I thought might be a nice idea. So I've had a look for a bird that maybe the colours will work with this. So it might be a slightly muted coloured bird. So I'm going to go off now and look for an image and get a little sketch on here and see if I can add a bird to this, but make it work with what's happening. I don't want my bird to sort of end up in the middle of the painting, so I've got to look at putting it down here and bringing some more foliage around it. So I'll just go and see if I can find an image. I've got several bird books. I'll look at something that's going to work with this. So I've found a little bird. It's just about life size on here to suit the Bougainvillea. It's a brown honey eater. So its colours are fairly muted in the head, not a lot of colour in the chest, a little bit of yellow down here, maybe a little bit olivey greeny brown colour into here. So I think it's going to work well with this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off this masking fluid on these centres, and when I look closely at the centre, of one of these Bougainvillea blossoms, I can see bits of yellow in there as well. So I think that will help tie in with the colours on the bird. So I'm going to take off all of this masking and might paint the centres along with painting the bird at the same time. I'm not sure. I don't want to make too much of these centres. They're very, very small. I don't want to lose all of the white at the paper there, because I think it gives a little bit of lightness in there. So as I paint the bird, that'll probably tell me how much detail I need to put into the rest of it. So just feeling over here, making sure I've got all of the masking off. Yep, I think that's all off. The salt's all off. So we're going to see how we go. I have a stem down here which is a little thicker. It could be a bigger branch coming out from a part of the plant over here. But he has to have something to sit on, and I might just try surrounding with a little bit of loose stuff around the back of the bird here. I'm not sure. That's the sort of thing I do as I go along, trying to paint on what might suit the bird. I'm going to try and see if I can use the colours on the palette already to make the colours up for the bird, because it's a lot of grey. So maybe if I get my green here in with my red, I might be able to get a grey out of this without looking for another colour. But it's a case of just having a little look, because it might not be a pretty enough grey, and I might want to look for something else. But a bit of extra blue in there. Bit of extra blue in there might do it. If you can mix extra colours from what you're already using throughout the painting, it does actually give a bit of a cohesive look to it. But sometimes it's not possible. You might have put something in that's really different, and you may have to look for another colour. I've got a beak up over here. I'm just looking to see what I think about this grey. Will it work for me? I think it will. It's very colourful, but that's probably a pretty good idea, pretty good thing to look for anyway than a boring grey colour. And the yellowy colour that I want for down here, I'm going to use some of that in the centre of the flowers. So I've got some Aureolin here, which will probably work quite well. I could still put some of the green gold in with this, and a little bit of the browny colour. So I think I could get the bird's colours out of that. I think I have enough colour on my bird. I haven't done the legs and the feet. I'm going to see, first of all, what I'm going to do with this little stem here before I paint the feet. You can either do the feet first, then you've got to paint around them, or you could put the little branch in and paint the feet on the top, so there's no right or wrong way. I think maybe I've got the legs a little bit fat there. I might just rub out that bit of pencil line I've got there so that I don't paint it that big. So I'm going to add some feet, add some stem, a little bit of background, and then I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of work, not very much at all, but into these little centres. And then I'm just about done. Well, I think I've achieved my goal with this, which was to depict the Bougainvillea that I brought home this morning. I've added a bird to it for some interest, and I've still tried to keep it a little bit loose and delicate looking, and I'll look at it with fresh eyes when it's dry, but I'm fairly pleased with how it's turned out, and I've got to stop myself now from fiddling. But sometimes when you step away from it and you look again, you see a few little things that you might like to tweak, and you don't always see everything all of the time, especially when you're working on it for a while. So sometimes it's good to look with fresh eyes. But I'll have a look and see if there's anything else that I might like to do with it. And then I'm going to call this one done. So I hope you've enjoyed watching my process for putting together a work from life, an image that I've found, and just working away with nice little bits of texture, interesting little colour mixes, and coming up with something that pleases you. So till next time, thanks for watching. Bye.